speaker, Anthony Carroll. Aim for the stars. Aim for the stars. And here.
Many years ago, while I was still clean cut and somewhat professional, I was in the Navy. And during that time, they actually assigned me to be an instructor. I did a fairly decent job once I got into the groove of it. Because they already had the slides that I had to put up. They had all my talking material. They had an outline. It was all done for them. All I had to do was follow everything that they had. It's fairly easy. And I had what we would call a captive audience. They're sailors. They have to be there. They're not allowed to be anywhere else. If they don't show up, they're in trouble. It was a pretty easy gig. And then one day, my boss came to me and says, guess what? We get to do next month's training. I'm like, what? What do you mean next month's training? Yeah, command wide, all the instructors are going to show up at the base theater. And you, Anthony, are going to be one of the presenters. You have to give a 45-minute to 1 hour lecture on the safety of falling. Safety of falling, excuse me. Yeah, the dangers of falling. So like ladders, falling out of bed, falling off the roof, things like that. For 45 minutes to an hour. Not a big deal. I can make a PowerPoint. I can make it last an hour. No problem. What they didn't tell me was everybody on base from the rank of 05 and above was going to be there as well. It was not a very comfortable feeling when I found that out. But I did the research. I got the videotapes that were from the training department that gave us all kinds of statistics. Let me tell you, they were all superfluous. Because none of them are more recent than the 60s. And this was 2002. But I did learn that there are actually 25 people every year in America that die falling out of bed. Kind of scary. And we're not talking bunk beds. We're talking about people in their king-size bed, rolling off the bed and dying. But the mistake that I made during that training lecture, I didn't have my cool, suave, debonair personality that I have now. I made this PowerPoint, and anybody familiar with PowerPoints? You should be very limited in what you put on a PowerPoint. I made mine a word salad. It's like I took the dictionary, threw it up there, and there were all kinds of words. And then I made the fatal error. I read every single statement on the PowerPoint. I didn't know any better. That's what I did. Then the full bird captain gets up there after the training and talks about the other two trainers and said how wonderful their training was. And then he turned and says, for the information of everybody in this room, he actually grabbed the lectern. He looked at everybody. And he goes, I know how to read. If it's up there on the PowerPoint, you do not have to read it to me. Anything else, Sir Harold? You will be giving training again next month on another topic, and I don't expect you to read to me. Do you understand? The only words that came out of my mouth were, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Presentation mastery was not what I was good at, apparently. So when I saw this path and pathways, I glossed over it right away. That was not something that I was going to do because apparently I'm not really good at it. Or at least that's what my brain was telling me. Yeah, we don't want to go there. That's, bad juju. So I thought about it. I had to pick a path. And I picked one, and I picked another one, I'm looking at this one, and then I decided, you know what? I did this Toastmaster thing, so I could get better at the things that I wasn't good at. So instead of doing that, run from it, I just face the music and take advantage of it. Now, that's a real long introduction to tell you what I learned about this, because I thought this path was going to teach me how to do all kinds of PowerPoint tricks. It's not so much PowerPoint. You can use visual aids if you want in a presentation, but they're not always necessary. And that was something that was a mind shift for me. And they didn't start off on that. They started at the basic level. Vocal variety. That's something that is really important. If you want to get somebody's attention, raise your voice. If you really want to get their attention, whisper. Because everybody wants to hear what you're saying. You know where I learned that? There used to be a commercial back in the 70s and 80s. What's that? TR Will? EF Hutton. Yes. Well, my broker's EF Hutton. The entire restaurant goes quiet. And they all listen. They said, and then they give the advice. You whisper, people tend to pay attention. Because they want the juicy gossip. Or they want the good information. So that was one of the first things that I had to learn in this path. And then the right gestures. You just don't want to be up here waving like you're a signalman in the Navy, you know, with the flags and doing that semaphore. That doesn't do any good. Now, I did learn that I have a habit of doing the praying hands often. So I had to work on that. I actually gave a speech yesterday that somebody pointed that out, that I was doing the praying hands, but then they realized that I was doing it for a purpose because I was so worried. I was really wringing my hands. So when you have a reputation of doing something like this, you have to be careful that somebody doesn't assume that it's the other thing. So you have to be very conscious of your gestures. So that was something else that I learned that I had to be careful about. And then we ramped up. We had to go into things like, what is my leadership style? Now, I'm 6'5", 300 plus pounds. So some people would think that just my imposing size would be a good thing for leadership. But nobody wants to be led by somebody that's imposing. So I've actually had to develop a leadership style that is a little bit more coach-like, supportive. How can I help you? What do you need to get this job done? Hey, you're doing really great. Keep it up, and maybe change this one little aspect and do it a little bit at a time. And that's something that that whole leadership part pointed out to me. And then, of course, mentorship. Am I a good mentor? I don't know. I try, but again, it depends on who you're mentoring and what style they take mentorship from. Because not everybody's going to be a perfect match. So I know I like to do that coaching thing and that supportive role, as opposed to, you need to do it this way, and this is the only right way, and do it this way now, which a lot of people do have as a leadership style or mentorship style. So be careful. That's one of the things I learned. Find out what style they need as a mentor, so that you can go ahead and fulfill their needs and not so much yours. So that was a big takeaway, that's how I had to present myself. Some of the other things that I learned is, yes, you can do the presentation, but then you have to be careful with the visual aids. Does anybody here know what Prezi is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Prezi is a really cool take on PowerPoint. But I've actually heard some people get sick when they're watching it, especially if it's on a big screen. Because what happens is it'll zoom into one location on your display, and it'll go ahead and bring it up big so that you can see it. And then when you click next, instead of a slide changing, it'll zoom out and zoom into another area, and it goes back and forth. And depending on how fast you're changing your slides with how much information you have, People actually feel nauseous after watching one of those. So again, it's knowing your audience is very important. So by doing that, I learned that maybe PowerPoint, the presentations aren't right for every presentation. So instead, maybe a handout would be beneficial. So again, the important part, and this is a whole part of level 4, is knowing your audience, knowing what they need or what will benefit them. So I've learned something that even though what I'm comfortable with may not be the best solution for everybody else. So the only thing that you can really do in a situation like this, as I think it was one of the authors said, aim for the stars. If you miss, you'll still hit the moon. If you aim for the moon, you'll only hit the mountains. If you aim for the mountains, well, then all you're going to do is hit the ground in front. So always aim for the stars. Do the best that you can, and you'll be successful. But there's always room to grow. And that's what I've learned about this path. I will always have room to grow, especially from those days back in the early 2000 time period when my boss told me I sucked. Madam Toastmaster.